have with us today Runam Mehta, who is actually a very dear friend of mine. I've known her since many, many years, decades of knowing Runam, decades of seeing firsthand Runam's amazing journey. And being a little bit older than her just makes me really proud to have Runam do this with us today. So I'm welcoming here Runam Mehta, who's a startup expert. Runam works within the startup ecosystem in her domain expertise, which is healthcare, fitness, and wellness. Runam, thank you so much for doing this and helping us shape the narrative of the future of work. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Vibha, for having me. I'm very excited to be part of this project.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so Runam, why don't we start with just telling us a little bit about your educational and career journey and the last couple of years and how they've shaped up for you.
Great, thanks. So I'm a Marwadi by birth, as you know, and I always had an inclination towards medicine, and for a variety of reasons, I chose to be a physiotherapist. So not too many people know this, but by education, I'm a physiotherapist, and I did do clinical practice for a couple of years. After which I had my first, now in retrospective, we can call it a startup. At that time, it just felt like a very natural kind of business that I started, where I was consulting organizations about their employees' well-being in terms of their postural health and the furniture and the workspace design and how that could be made to work better. And I was in Mumbai, right? So you're looking at the banking sector, you're looking at the manufacturing sector. I've worked with BKD, for example, and Barclays Bank, and who not. And post that, when I got married, I moved to Bangalore, and the Bangalore ecosystem was extremely different than Mumbai. What I realized here is it made no sense to get into clinical practice, and the startup world was just starting to kind of enter health. I joined Portia back in 2014. Portia was, today is India's largest home healthcare company, but at that time was a startup, with a few small business verticals. I've worked with them for 7 years, built almost every healthcare service that they have. At different stages, worked with them on their sales strategy, B2B strategy, corporate strategy, launched COVID's home isolation program. So during the pandemic, we worked with 7 different state governments to treat over 1 lakh patients at home, for home isolation. Post the first wave of the pandemic, I joined Healthcube. And Healthcube, interestingly, designs and manufactures diagnostic devices that do 30 tests on the spot, and a very good fit for rural India. During the pandemic, I realized that while we were working, this is this whole other India that we're not even touching when we live in a Bangalore or a Mumbai. And I wanted to think about ways in which we can interact with them and their healthcare needs. So that's where Healthcube happened. I've been the CEO for the last 2+ years at Healthcube. And yeah, this is where we are.
Okay, fantastic. What a journey, Runam. Looks like you've started literally ground up, been a physiotherapist, gone through that training, worked with clients one-on-one, then moved to the business side, worked on the B2B side, and then helped shape strategy. And now you sit at the helm of an organization. So really, you've seen different factions and you worked in cities, urban, rural, all of it. It's going to be a great discussion. Super excited because you come with this breadth and depth of expertise. So as we talking about this, the topic of the book, the future of work, and this is sort of a buzzy topic currently. In your experience, having worked in so many different organizations, why even consider talking about the future of work? What makes this an interesting conversation to have, and why must we discuss the narrative and talk about the future of work?
I think workspaces, skills required at the workplace, even what work could look like in terms of not 9 to 5, but very, very different dimensions of work. I think the change is going to be tremendous and rapid. Some things won't change, right? Like the collaborative nature of work, I think if anything is going to become more intense and not change in any other fashion. But I think everything else that we grew up knowing or thinking about as work. All of our fathers went into office at a certain time, came back at a certain time, Sundays were off, and that's just what it was. I think from then to now, in the last 20 years, work has changed. And I think next 20 years, work is going to change so much more than it did in the last 2 decades, that this is an extremely important conversation to be having, especially for the ones who are 20-year-olds today, or 10-year-olds today.
And in your capacity as advisor to startups, are you seeing them think about, because as a startup, you're always trying to go to where the puck is, not where the puck is today is where it's going to be. So when you're thinking about where it's going to be, are you seeing these conversations in the startups where saying, hey, look, we're not building a business for today, we're building a business for the next 15 years or whatever the time frame may be?
Absolutely. And I think more so because I belong to the health sector, right? So medtech, the landscape is changing so rapidly. I really believe that maybe 20, 30 years later, when we look back at today, uh, some of our practices, some of our devices, some of our innovations, what we take for granted today might look as primitive as the bloodletting practices of medieval times. Because the pace of change, especially in health, is extremely rapid. So there are startups that are thinking and creating solutions for problems that we don't even know exist today.
Wow. Okay. Any examples you can share? And you mentioned two very interesting things. One is the pace of change in healthcare, medtech, etc. And just for the sake of the listeners, if you could just explain what medtech even is and what evolution you've seen in medtech so far. And you mentioned just generally about startups. So if you could talk about those two factions, that would be very interesting. Like any examples or data, something to.
Absolutely. So medtech, when we say medtech, what we mean is, well, exactly what it means, right? Technology that's happening, or that's being developed that will impact medical care. It can mean devices, it can mean algorithms, it could mean software. It also includes AI, interpreting your scans. So to give you a few examples, right? I spoke recently to somebody, it's stealth mode, so I'm not going to reveal too much, but I spoke to someone who's saying, at some stage, there'll be AI doctors. There won't be doctors that we know today. There'll be these artificially intelligent doctors who will have everything, right? They'll have all the billions of data points that exist in the world. Some of it is on paper, some of it is inaccessible. They'll have all of this inside of their artificial brain. And, there needs to still be a human interface that is able to make sense, or that is able to kind of differentiate between what is critical based, the AI is going to give you a report. It's going to give you information. It's going to distill all this data and give you, maybe a 2-pager. But what if this is most relevant to this human in front of me? And that's a problem we don't know exists today. So there are people who are thinking about, what do you do? How do you sharpen the AI so much that either it's able to distill it for you, or you create people, or you train people, train, of course, train people to be able to use that tool much more effectively than what we could do today. That's one very, very extreme example, but we're talking about, diagnosing diabetes with your breath or with your saliva. I mean, I think diagnosing diabetes with your saliva is technology that already exists. And now we're moving on, and we're saying, can it be diagnosed with your breath? There was a company that was diagnosing COVID from sound. So you had to say, a couple of words into the application, and it would detect whether you have COVID or not. Of course, by then the pandemic cycle had started to die down. So, now they are reusing the technology for different things. But that was a legit organization that was commercially selling their solution. It wasn't, it isn't a pipe dream anymore. And all of this is medtech.
Okay. And since you worked in the industry and you worked with Porsche for so many years, and they're still, as you said, at the helm of their sector, what changes have you actually seen happening over the last decade or so in this space? Is there a line you can draw saying, look, here's where it was, here's where we started, and here's where we are, and if this is where we've moved, this rate of acceleration has been this in 10 years, here's where we could hypothetically be in the next 10?
Well, honestly, I don't. I mean, of course, Portia has evolved and Portia has changed, but let me talk about, it's a service company. So, they're still providing people to come home and take care of you. But let me talk about the industry overall, right?
Yeah.
So let's take diabetes, because everyone has someone in their house who has diabetes. And there was a time when you needed to go into a laboratory maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and get a blood drawn in order to get, and then you were told you have sugar. And then all of our grandparents would come home and say, "Inko sugar hai." To the point where, it took maybe 2-3 decades for every home to have a glucometer.
Sure.
And a glucometer is as easily available in a household as a thermometer today.
Sure.
Right. So you take a pinprick and you know that you have diabetes. From there, and we're talking about wearables, right, which are not accurate. They're good enough for fitness tracking. They're not good enough for wellness tracking. But there are people working on wearables that will detect your diabetes and your blood pressure. There are already wearables for blood pressure. You do not need that blood pressure machine anymore. There's a lead that goes on your chest and it tracks your blood pressure, it tracks your glucose for the entire day. We're moving ahead of that. We're going to say, breathe into this, spit into this, and you know what your health matrix look like. Potentially, you could have eaten a meal, and 2 hours later, you'll know how much rice has impacted you versus how much that jalebi has impacted you versus how much that fruit juice has impacted you. And the reason this is important, Vibha, is what is really the future of medicine, right? If you ask me, at some stage and before I die, I want to be able to see personalized medicine. Medicine we take today, you pop in a crocin, it's been tested on mostly Caucasian males, literally 100 years ago. And how does that dosage, how relevant is that dosage to a Vibha Kagzi or a Runam Mehta? Right? And this is crocin. It's just such an easy medicine. But what about cancer drugs? What about, a stent that goes into your heart? What about your pacemaker? Right? One size cannot fit all. A Caucasian study cannot fit an African American or people of Asian descent, and male, female, amount of fat, amount of you are heading your genetic markers. So you're heading to a point where medicine will be tailored, and for critical diseases, medicine will be tailored to you.
And it'll be possible to tailor this and personalize it to this extent because machines will then start crunching that amount of data. AI will do that for us.
Yeah, that's where we want to head. I mean, that's where we are heading. Whether it's going to take 20 years or 50 years, and whether it's going to be cheap and accessible and affordable, those questions of course remain. But this is where we are heading. I mean, we have millionaires and billionaires in America today talking about reversing their age. They're 50-year-olds who want to be 20, and they're spending millions of dollars on that. What happens when one of these guys gets cancer? They're not going to take the standard dosage.
Sure. Okay. So lots of change coming. Potentially a room full of AI doctors, wearable devices that are now going to track our diabetes, and a lot of personalization coming into the broader field of healthcare. Okay. Thanks, Runam. I think you've identified a bunch of areas. Let's see where we actually end up. But this is interesting to understand. So, you talk about these changes, and as you think about these changes, what have you identified as like primary factors that are affecting these changes? Of course, you've used the word technology a bunch of times. In addition to tech, and of course, feel free to elaborate more on tech, what are the other factors you're seeing that are influencing this rate of acceleration?
I think one of the big factors has got to be, I think as a population, we have always pushed boundaries. If you look back to thousands of years ago, from the time when we were hunters and gatherers to where we are today, the fact is, as a race, we've always pushed boundaries in order to make life better, easier, comfortable, secure. And where we are today, a lot of the world population is now surviving. Survival is no longer something that we're thinking about, and that opens up creative possibilities. And we know this, that we've seen this happen in the more mature markets. So as more and more of the population has the time to push boundaries and has the ability to push boundaries, I think that combined with the fact that youth today is more concerned about making a larger impact and contributing to society than they were ever before. I mean, our grandparents saw really hard times and they cared about building a good future for their immediate families. Sure. And then our parents kind of built on that and wanted security for their children. And what do we want today? Just look at you and me. What do we want? We want to push boundaries. We want to do stuff that hasn't been done before. And there's far more innovative, far more intelligent, far more creative people who have the same kind of thinking cap on.
You're saying
That combined,
demographic shift.
there's
There's
a
a
demographic shift.
purpose-driven career
Absolutely.
choices being made.
Purpose
Okay.
driven career choices, desire to make impact. And also now when you make impact, you're thinking about the world. You're not thinking about your family and your village. Impact on a much larger, a more global scale. And then you start thinking about what are the world's problems. And health has to be, I mean, after probably hunger, health has to be, the
One of the, sure.
biggest things that needs, boundaries pushed.
Okay. And other factors that are going to affect the future of work, anything on, the geopolitical environment, on DEI, like what other factors are you seeing that are going to affect our lives?
I mean, thank you for bringing up DEI. And I I like to think that DEI and flexibility go together, right? Because you cannot be inclusive without being flexible. So a lot of, and the reason I'm saying this, a lot of people today talk about how the youth want flexibility, and why should they want flexibility? Flexibility should be a given. Because how can you talk about being inclusive if you're not open or flexible to think about diverse opinions? If you're not open to, how do you get working moms, queer people, how do you be open to working with people in the global stage, people, different time zones, if you're not going to be flexible? And if you're not open to diverse opinions, if you're not open to diversity coming in and influencing your way of work, you're solving for today's problems. You're not solving for tomorrow's problems. It is only when you invite diverse opinions in that you even start to think about problems that did not exist. You have to kind of meet a blind child to think about. And I'm going to bring this example up. I have a friend who's working on glasses, which would be given to blind children, and with those glasses, for the lack of a better word, I'm calling it glasses, more like a VR kind of headset. Yeah, they're able to perceive changes in their immediate environment. So they're able to tell if someone has entered that environment. And over time, because if they're meeting you over and over again, they're meeting Vibha over and over again, over time, their headsets become smart enough to tell them that Vibha has now entered the coffee shop and is sitting in front of you. And it sounds so simple, but it's not for that person who's deprived of eyesight. And for someone to be able to think about what are the day-to-day problems that these people deal with, and how do you make their life even a little better, that requires you to be open to diversity.
Okay, but it looks like it's a chicken and egg, right? So if someone is solving for diversity issues, then this person becomes now capable of sitting in front of an office team and then operating at par with everyone, which then will allow for the flexibility. So I don't know who's going to first solve for this. Is the other corporations going to put out a mandate saying, oh, we want 5% diversity in the workspace? And with as a follow through of that, they're like, oh, okay, now we've got to equip all these people. Somebody please invent something that's going to allow this, or the invention is going to come first. Like, I'm wondering, who's solving for what problem first in what sequence?
It's a very interesting question, and I haven't thought about it that way, honestly. But I think, as in any, whenever boundaries get pushed, there's always those early adopters, right? So there's going to be that 5, 10, or 15% of the people who either are already thinking about it or who are going to start thinking. And maybe it's because of your family or your best friend, someone who has a struggle that sparks something in you and creates change which impacts larger organizations. But I think eventually it's going to be when you have diverse populations and you see the change that can be brought in, that's when the herds will follow, right? That's when the other 85% wakes up and says, I want some of that.
So how will the diversity change happen? Are corporations going to now mandate it? You think government is going to come in and mandate it? Or is it just going to happen organically because the population, just by nature of being a population that's evolving, will become diverse and you don't leave an employer with any other choice? How do you see this evolving?
Very good question again. I think it's both. One is the fact that, of course, the population is getting more diverse. I mean, if you look at the United States of America today, there isn't a choice. I mean, if you start an organization with 100 people, a large percentage of them are going to be Asians, whether or not you're trying. So it is just what their world has become. So but that's one kind of diversity. I think there is another kind of diversity that we do need to fight for. There was the feminist movement that happened back in the early 90s and sorry, early 60s.
It keeps happening. It happened in the 60s.
It happens every now and then, right? And it's a battle that hasn't yet fully been won, as we both know. But and I see that happening today for trans folks. I mean, there's I never, and I'm ashamed to say it, but I never understood the concept of transgender till I was like maybe till 10 years ago or 15 years ago, right? And I'm a pretty woke person.
Yeah.
But today, I'm sure my child will hear about it at the age of 6 or 7, and not when she's 40. So I think every few years, and the movement changes shape and form, but I don't think the movement for inclusion ever really shuts down.
Okay, great. Okay, and anything you want to talk about technology in any capacity, since we've spoken about medtech already? Anything else you want to share on that factor, and then we'll move to the next question.
I think we were talking about the rapid change of pace, and then we didn't really go back to it. And what I believe is this, and very, very specific to India, is that India is full of bright people, but not all of those bright people are sitting in the same place, right? So you can't really enter a room and say, oh, I'm going to meet every bright person there is. There's these really bright people, these amazing innovators are sitting all over the country and found in all forms of shapes and sizes. And I really believe that if we want there to be dramatic, if you want to kind of leverage fully the space of change, then someone, and maybe that's governance, maybe it's people like me, we need to go and seek these innovators out. We need to find them. Innovation needs to be supported and not curbed. So our governance needs to, and it's happening in India. I think Make in India movement, Startup India movement, all of these are kind of focused on helping, supporting, and bringing to light some of these innovations, because innovations, however great they could be, will die an early death if they aren't given the right kind of stage.
So you are seeing that as another factor. You are seeing this political endorsement of a movement to find talented people, help startups. You are.
But I'm saying there needs to be a lot. I'm saying
a lot more.
Country is amazingly innovative, and maybe we need to have like 5x or 10x the ecosystem in order to leverage what is possible.
Or 500x, because still India is not still known for innovation, right? We're still looked at as a copycat nation.
Yeah.
It's not really viewed internally, even domestically. We all look at America as our role model for innovation.
Yeah.
No one has a serious
or Israel.
Country or Israel.
For medical, for health, honestly, Israel is it's the economy too.
Okay, but you're seeing that happening, and in Israel and in the US in many capacities, they do push innovation, and the universities, research centers.
Yeah.
So worldwide, we're going to see this sort of thrust. Most definitely in India, we need to do a lot more. Okay. All right, let's talk about. So this is good. This is a good foundation. You've given us a general sense of where the sector might go, different factors that might influence it. Now, we're constantly using this rate of change in our conversation. So to keep up with these changes, how our workspace is going to evolve? What's going to happen to the workspace? Are you seeing hybrid? Are you seeing flex entirely? Are you seeing the office completely remove the word office won't be known to the next generation? Where do you predict this is going?
Okay, my best guess. Okay, I think we've done it all, right? We've done the 9 to 5, we've done the night shifts, we've done the glorified working 18 hours, 16 hours a night, a day, whatever. We've done work. Everyone works from home. We've done hybrid. I think we've experimented as an economy. Of course, some of it was forced on us, but we've done all of this. I think what's really going to happen is it's going to become irrelevant. Honestly, I think
irrelevant. Okay.
The workspace. Let me say it again. I think this office or this conversation is going to become moot, because where we are heading is towards extremely collaborative work. If you ask me, I think what's going to happen, or what should happen, is a renting of skills, a trading of skills rather than a trading of time. I don't know if it's making sense, or if I'm being articulated enough.
And then I'll tell you if it's making.
But I think what's going to happen, you saw this moonlighting movement with a lot of big players try to squash down. And I think that really is the future of work, where if I'm really, really great at something, why should my skill only be applied to this one organization in this one, box? Because the new gen does not like to be boxed. And that's why they're saying, we don't want to come to office. We want to work from anywhere. We want to be flexible. But I'm saying, why not rent your skill? And people are doing this. I mean, maybe this is what consulting is. I think a lot more of that is going to happen. A lot more of collaborative work, a lot more of people doing their bit, for multiple people probably, and then, and then withdrawing. And so you're not just trading your time for money. You're not going to sit in office or wherever from 9 to 5 and then get paid for it. You're going to get paid for deliverables. You're going to be paid for your skill. You're going to be paid for your experience. You're going to get paid for your knowledge, and you're going to be free to kind of distribute it to a lot more people.
What happens to competitive advantage of an organization? What if the CTO of Uber says, "Hey guys, I'm going to work with Uber," and maybe they'll do like a sectoral NDA saying you can't work for anyone else within the taxi sharing system or whatever. But if you'd like to go apply your skill set in self-driven cars, then sure, go for it because it doesn't affect, well, it actually in their case, it might be a bad example, but in a completely unrelated industry, then maybe they might allow for him to share his skill set.
Yeah. Or, I mean, and the point is the learnings apply, right? I mean, honestly, whether it's Uber or it's Swiggy or it's Dunzo, they're all essentially logistics marketplaces, right? They're trying to match market. So what I've learned from Uber, theoretically, could be applied to a Swiggy. What I'm learning from a Swiggy can very easily be applied to a Big Basket or a Dunzo, because they're essentially solving for the same problem. And then why not a Portia? Because they were delivering healthcare to multiple people. So I believe that learnings and skills can be used across industries, which helps with accelerated growth.
As long as organizations see it like that, right? Because people are territorial about their workforce.
But eventually, I don't think they'll have a choice, because if your best guys are only willing to rent their skills and not, kind of sell their souls, what choice do you have? And the thing is, what we shouldn't forget is that you will benefit from it too. Because this guy is coming with a host of experience and a host of learning and a very, very wide. I mean, you said this at the beginning of our call. You said you have a breadth and a depth of experience. And a lot of people have that breadth as well as depth of experience by the time they're 10, 15 years into the workforce. And, any organization that works with them will benefit from it.
Okay. Cool. This is a very interesting concept. Okay, so money for skills, now money for time. And what happens to the workspace then in this sort of world? How do you envision the workspace evolving? Is the space even going to be there? Is home going to become space? What's going to happen to workspaces? Because that influences the real estate industry, which in turn of cities and urban development, it's like a larger question.
Absolutely. Well, in my opinion, workspace should always be there. Whether it will or it won't, I don't know. But I think workspace to me is sacrosanct. I'm very conservative or very traditional in that sense, where I like to go into office. I like to meet my people. I like to,
How till 5 years ago, like we all went to work, and now we have to
every day.
We have to put a disclaimer saying, call me traditional, but I want to go to an office.
See, that's what I'm saying. Rate of change, right? 5 years ago, I mean, true, for me, it was even 3 years ago. I was going to office every single day, and now I don't go in every day. But in my head, I do need to have an office. Sure. I need to have a space where I'd go, and I do not. Let me put it this another way. I'm happy to do calls and stuff, but it's not the same as meeting over coffee, is it? It's not, right? And I also do not want to have, all of my colleagues come into my house. It's not the right environment. For a party, sure. Not really for a meeting. And I want to have an office. I want to gather. And in fact, in my current workplace, we do that. Every Wednesday, we call it Chai Pe Charcha, where we basically just order tea. We have a hybrid work model, so everyone can work from wherever they want. But every Wednesday, 4 p.m., there is tea on the house with lots of amazing snacks, and everyone comes in. And, then 40 of us are kind of catching up on work as well as non-work stuff. So to me, workspace is important, but is it a deal breaker to not have a workspace? Not anymore.
Okay, so it's not a deal breaker. You're saying you like the office. For you, it's sort of sacrosanct. You don't have to necessarily go in every day, but some sort of meeting ground outside of your home space where the team assembles and feels like some sort of cohort.
Absolutely. Teams, clients, vendors, all of that. Investors.
You
don't want them coming home, right?
Okay, okay. But you see you're in your world, at least if you had the chance to shape the world, you would maintain your office space.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, cool. So now we've spoken about what changes are coming, factors, how workspaces are going to evolve, etc. How do you keep up with all this, right? There's all this change coming in terms of skill set. And I know you have a daughter. If you were going to impart this sort of, skill-based education to her and say, here, if first of all, you can't control what the kids want to do and you shouldn't control what they want to do. But if you were going to influence it in a motherly capacity, what sort of skills would you say, like, children, here's what's necessary for you to be future ready? What skills do you need? Hard and soft both.
Hard and soft both. Wow. Okay. So honestly, Vibha, I don't think life skills have changed. I think the skills that you need to successfully navigate life and work have been the same since really, really primitive times. And what is that? That is collaboration, negotiation, the ability to communicate, and that hasn't changed over thousands of years, and that's never going to change. It shouldn't change because the fact is that we will continue to work with other people.
Sure.
And and technology will change, and how you communicate with computers it's going to change 10 times over. I have a 6-year-old, right? Realistically speaking, she's going to enter the workplace 2 decades later. And I don't think me or anybody else can say what are the hard skills that she's going to need. I mean, there was a time when programming was important, and software developers were all the rage. And my child is going to start learning to code in grade 2.
Sure.
But is that going to be applicable 2 decades later when she goes into the workforce? I'm sure it won't. I'm 101% sure it will be of absolutely no use at all. But the ability to learn, the ability to collaborate, the ability to negotiate to get what you want, or to make sure that both of you get what you want, and the ability to communicate your needs, your wants, your understanding of what's happening in the world. I think those are the absolute non-negotiable life and work skills. Besides this, if there's something that the workforce, even today and tomorrow, needs is decision-making ability. And what is this decision-making skills? It's the ability to kind of look at a complex problem, kind of break it down to its bare bones, right? Like really get to the crux of the matter, look at this large structure and say, what is the building brick of this problem? And then based on the constraints that you have, based on the information you have, you make the smartest trade-offs and move forward. Don't get stuck in this analysis paralysis where you spend weeks and months and, so many resources analyzing every possible kind of, unless you're running a military, but, short of those kind of, really hard sciences, you need to be able to decide. And the ones who have the superior judgment, the ones who have the better decision-making ability are the ones I think who are going to be the leaders of tomorrow.
Because the machines are going to be able to process a lot of the information that we are kind of doing manually today. Correct. So you're going to have a ready stack of data available to you that's been processed by somebody already.
Exactly.
But then to factor in the human component, the X factors, all the other variables.
And the relevance.
And the context of what's going on.
The context of what this data could potentially mean or do or, apply. So I think decision-making ability is, besides the 3 core soft skills, decision-making ability is something that they need to be able to kind of imbibe.
Okay. And it's very interesting. You initially said that the skills haven't changed because in all the interviews, people are like, oh, you need leadership, collaboration. I'm like, but that we've always needed. In today's workspace, we need it. And so how is that going to be different? So they are actually you just, this is what I'm predicting. So I'm glad you qualified it saying, look, we've always needed this. But obviously, as you were going into, and let's maybe go a little bit more into depth because you'll be now collaborating with a more diverse workspace, which we're not used to, right? It's going to be a change of workspace.
Yes.
You're going to be negotiating with machines. You're going to be able to have to like our communication courses when we were younger were like, oh, you go learn public speaking and you learn to emote because you're talking to human beings. But now how do you have this conversation in a workspace that's half human and half machine? So I think the communication training is going to be very different from, the public speaking classes we were sent to. So what else, in what way are you seeing like leadership, collaboration, soft skills evolving? What is the new age context with this man and machine ecosystem shifting how our workspace is?
So very interesting way you brought it up, right? Because you mentioned the fact that it's going to be diverse, and diverse in the sense of kinds of people, but also people and machines. So let's look back at what leaders or bosses looked like 2 decades ago. And I can see you smiling, and that's because you know what I'm talking about, right? It was that man in a suit,
Yeah.
and he's kind of leading the charge, and everyone has to kind of just do what he said. And that's how education system trained us, and it unfortunately continues to in some ways train us for that. And that's already evolved. Today, as a leader, and I've been leading, for a few years now. As a leader, I feel like it's my job uh, to almost facilitate decision making, right? When there are four other people with diverse views, and it's my job to make sure everyone has a platform to listen, and then take away what's relevant from each one's conversation, remove the biases, remove the fighting, remove the all the other undertones that can happen in a
So
workplace,
you're playing the role more of an intermediary.
and put the pieces together,
Yeah.
correct? So leadership has already become more about facilitating and allowing for people to come together and make a coherent decision. And then, of course, the decision making is non-negotiable. I think that more of that in tomorrow's world. How would we communicate with half human, half machine workforce? Your guess is as good as mine,
We've got
probably.
to skillful. We've got to be skillful. We're not skill ready for that.
Yeah,
So
we're
that's
not. We're not. Absolutely not. I think this is a problem. It's one of those problems that you don't know you need a solution for, which I
Hmm.
spoke about at the beginning of the call. Right? There are problems of tomorrow that we don't even know are going to exist, and I honestly we need to be solving for problems we don't understand. But to answer your question, how is leadership going to change? I think leadership is going to be about flexibility. It's
Hmm.
going to be about being open to sometimes allowing others to lead. It's going to be about accepting, a lot more accepting. The leaders of yesterday were not accepting at all,
Hmm.
right? They said, "This is my word, and you've got to just do it. Just shut up and do what I say." And the leaders of today are saying, "Okay, tell me what you think." And
Hmm.
maybe the leaders of tomorrow are going to be the ones who are able to pick the best decision
Sure.
rather than, because I don't think it's going to be humanly possible for any one person to know everything.
Okay, so if this is the future and if you were going to go into college just about now, what degree do you think you'd end up studying?
Wow. I think I'd still do medicine because
Business.
I did just love the anatomy and the biology. Uh, but I would also study economics, which I never did. And I would try to get a better understanding of how macro and micro happenings in the world can
Hmm.
impact uh, businesses, consumers, industries. I think that's something I started reading about much later in life.
So you'd pick medicine. That's a sort of interest, passion driven one. So one, you're saying pick. I'm trying to build a framework here.
Yes, yes, yes. Pick
Contextual.
what you love.
Pick what you love. So first, primarily, you're picking what you love, and then
Yes.
you're picking this economics and macro to make sure that you are aware of what's up with the rest of the world. Because my passion is obviously limited to one specific
Yeah.
sector.
Yeah.
So you're saying
Yeah.
pick a passion and then try to keep a pulse on whatever else is going on in the world. Okay, cool. All right, that's
And
it.
definitely pick up soft skills.
And definitely pick up soft
Even
skills.
if you're a techie, right? Because at one point in time, again, 20 years ago, it was okay to be a techie, a software developer, doing your own thing, working with your one system, never having to talk to humans again in your life. Uh, that's not going to work.
Well, it's both ways, right? The techies need the soft skills, and the soft skills people, the performers, the musicians are like, "Humko nahi seekhna technology." But now you're like, well, you better learn it. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
becomes sort of an
True.
equal playing field.
Absolutely.
There's no such demarcation as like I'm a techie or I'm not a techie because we all better be techies and we all better be a little bit of right brain and left brain to
Absolutely.
okay,
Well
cool.
said.
This is interesting. Okay, now as these changes evolve, in your capacity, considering your focus on the healthcare, wellness, and fitness space, if you were to provide some advocacy to change makers, so largest stakeholders in any country would be obviously the government, educators, and corporations, right? Let's just say the three big evils or the three big people who can with power to change stuff. What would you be telling them? What advice would you be giving to the three factions?
Okay. Wow, that's hard. Okay, for educators, and let me start with educators because my daughter, like you brought up, is 6 years old and she's in grade 1, and I think early education. I know this is more, going to be read by college students, but I'm saying even earlier,
Yeah.
while, and India has an amazing focus on STEM, right? Forever. And of course, that is important. I think STEM is more important than ever, the STEM subjects. But in addition to STEM, I think it's important to teach children how to think about STEM. I mean, I remember when I was in grade 1, I was told to learn the multiples, right? Like 2 into 2 is 4. And what does that mean is something I understood when I was in grade 12, probably.
Mm.
And that's not okay for the kids today. I think they need to understand concepts more than they need to know their tables, for example. So STEM, but with more of how to think rather than what to think, and a lot of focus on building, on being curious, on being comfortable with ambiguity. Because remember, we spoke about leaders and leaders telling you what to do and you've got to go do it. That's not the leaders they're going to have. They're going to have leaders who are going to say, this is my problem. 5 of you work together and solve it. Right? And one guy's going to be a tech guy, one guy's going to be a medical guy, one guy's going to be, probably a chaparasi
So
school somewhere.
you're advocating for a curriculum where instead of like when we grew up, we were individually learning stuff, right? Like you'd spend copious number of hours locked into our rooms like this and staring at textbooks. So you're now advocating for a curriculum that encourages collaboration at the school early years as well.
And also encourages comfort with ambiguity. But the reason
How do you do that? How do you do that in a curriculum?
Yeah, I'll come to it. I'll tell you that. So the reason I feel that I'm successful, honestly, in the startup world is because I'm so comfortable with ambiguous situations.
But how do you do that in a curriculum setting? Of course, ambiguity is
you give them problems that don't have a right answer. You give them problems to solve that could have multiple outcomes. And one outcome could be better than other outcomes.
A situation where there's no right or wrong answer.
There's better answers and there's worse answers.
Sure.
But that's life, isn't it? Think about it.
It's not.
There's no right. Yeah, there's no right way to become a CEO. You became a CEO in a very, very different pathway as compared to mine. But we both landed in the same place, and that's what life is. Life will take you on different journeys, and
so no binary responses. Try to go for
no binary responses. To be okay with not having binary responses. See, STEM is important, and that's very binary.
So I'm taking away 2 things. Try to encourage non-binary responses and collaboration for the educators. Okay, let's want to take governance.
For governance, and because I come from medicine, right? Very, very regulated. Very regulated. Devices are regulated. AI will get regulated, I'm sure, if it's not already. Of course, pharma is regulated. Insurances, everything is regulated, and that's good. Okay, regulations are extremely important because there's too much jugaad happening, and that's not good. But regulations where innovation is concerned need to allow room for growth, room for change. I feel like regulators, not only in this country, probably everywhere, are always playing catch up. Right? Just like education is always playing catch up because the world changes, and then you think about, how do we change our education for tomorrow? Similarly, regulatory bodies are always playing catch up with innovation. They need to be much more partners. Maybe your innovators also need to be your regulators. And that's a radical thought, because here you're saying that while I'm innovating, I also want to think about all the ways I could misuse this and then prevent that from happening.
Sure. I mean, at least they factor in the innovators in the decision making. Okay. So you're saying much more radical in terms of regulation.
Yes. Much more on their feet.
Okay. So more tuned into what's really going on.
More tuned in and more collaborative with the innovators. Today, regulators are either 10 years behind innovation, or they're curbing innovation in many ways. And they can't do either. Okay. Neither is good.
In your both your spaces, startups and healthcare, of course, regulation can play a massive role, right? Like they could provide so many SOPs to startups. They could encourage investors to come in, loosen up the investing rules around startups, and suddenly you'll have all this inflow going into early stage, as opposed to the Sensex, hitting its new record every second or third right now, at least. Okay, so governance plays a massive. When you talked about those devices, the wearables and the breath testers, if the government comes in and says, okay, 6 top states in India from tomorrow will now start, testing for diabetes or whatever through retina, that just changes the whole landscape. So governance, it has a big role to play, but
Yeah.
obviously it has to be cautionary governance. You want radical, but it has to be cautionary.
It's a difficult. See, I'm not saying it's an
Very
easy thing to
difficult.
do. It's a
Yeah.
tightrope balance, but it's still an important balance to play,
And
right?
like which technology should they favor, right? Because you're saying
Yeah.
like there'll be 6 ways of detecting this diabetes: breath and spit and eye and device and patches. I heard of some patches
Yes.
coming up.
Yes.
So now the
Yes.
governance is, I'm sitting in this, I'm just like, oh my God, which
What do we do?
industry am I going to favor? And
Yeah.
then it'll become like a case of, oh, someone lobbying, and it'll go into that.
I mean, of course it will, and that will happen regardless. But my
Hmm.
point is that when you just favor innovation, right? When you just say, I'm open, and see, the other thing to remember is that every technology has its limitation.
Hmm.
So if you're very cognizant of the limitations of your technology, of the technology that you're using, it makes it easier to open up to new technologies. I mean, the first time Alexa came to India and you tried to talk to it, it couldn't probably pick your accent,
Hmm.
right? And you didn't throw it out,
Hmm.
right? I mean, you tried 3 times and the fourth time it worked. And I mean, it's probably a bad example and
Hmm.
a little tricky because this is health that we're talking about and not some entertainment device. But my point is that if you're not open to innovation in principle, and if you're not cognizant of the fact that every technology has limitations,
Hmm.
if these two things don't happen, then you're always going to curb new things. And the other interesting thing is you cannot stop innovation.
Sure.
No matter what you do, the innovation will happen on black market.
The innovation will happen, but for it to see large scale implementation and result,
It's going to go into the
it
black
has to
market.
go. Huh.
You're going to pay under the table, and the people who are
And
wealthy
know
will
what you
still
mean.
do what they have to do. They'll go abroad. I mean, people go to Thailand and get their
All
kids
that.
sex changed or
Sure.
checked all the time.
Hmm.
So they'll do it anyway.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. So you're saying a much more open government, more in tune with the reality of
Yeah.
tomorrow, and also being a little bit more open and a little bit more radical in terms of encouraging innovation. Okay. So like an innovative government that says, okay, let's now support innovation. Okay. Let's move to the last question of of this conversation. We've spoken a lot about what's coming and what factors and governance, all of this. As we think about this future, are you generally optimistic, pessimistic, cautiously optimistic? What are you seeing as, if you just had to do basic SWOT, or if we just do opportunities and threats, what are you seeing as opportunities and threats of tomorrow?
I mean, honestly, I'm extremely optimistic because I believe as a population, we've constantly pushed boundaries and we've always found ways to make things better. Of course, we've made mistakes along the way, and the climate change speaks for itself now. But but overall, if you look at how our lives look, even just from 3 generations before us, you know, we're much better off in terms of health, in terms of fitness, in terms of survival, thriving. We're just better off.
Can you envision a future in which some of these technology innovations are begun to be misused? Like,
Oh,
what are
of
some
course.
of the pitfalls of this level of innovation in healthcare?
I mean, every technology has been misused. I
Because if we
mean,
have this amount of data on human beings, like what are some of the actual threats? Someone actually, one of the interviews told me, like, you could have a terrorist attack in a city. When we had an attack here in Bombay, you identified it to an enemy. There's a face to the enemy. He was eventually caught, because you know where it's coming from. But imagine a bot attacking the country. You won't be able to identify, and the parts will probably be assembled from 7 different countries. So there's no one country to blame. So that is a threat situation, which is a very real, tangible, and very possible situation. They could have bots coming in and attacking. So in your space, in the healthcare space, could you identify for us some threats which would put us into thinking zone, like, oh wow, I didn't think of this as a possible threat?
I mean, when we're talking about having all of this data, including your DNA and your genetic markers,
Hmm.
there could be a situation where you're bioengineering your children.
Bioengineering children. Okay.
And to me, and by that I don't mean child in a tube, because that already happens. We've already bioengineered animals. But I'm saying, when I'm saying bioengineering children, I'm saying parents, wealthy parents, playing the role of God and saying, this is the gene I want, and that is, I want those blue eyes, and cherry picking what your child should look like and what diseases he, of course none,
Hmm.
should or should. And And I feel like that's almost like playing God.
Mm.
And that cannot, I mean, I don't remember the name of the book where we talked about, and maybe Nazis tried doing this, right? Where they wanted this Aryan race.
Mm.
And imagine actually having the ability to do that.
Mm. Okay. So you can go to like a clinic and say,
Super,
oh, what's the child
yeah,
I want? Like,
yeah. And that's super scary to me because, I think that would mark the downfall
and that could
of the
happen
population.
with the
That could
personalization
happen.
you spoke
That can
about.
happen. That is
That could
a
happen.
very real
Scary
possibility.
situation. Okay. Anything else coming to your mind? Anything else like
A
this?
little less sci-fi.
Yeah, more sci-fi even better because it's very interesting to think. And it honestly doesn't seem so unrealistic. It
It's
could
not,
be
and unfortunately, 20 years ago, it sounded like a movie could be made out of it, but
yeah.
today it's not. The other thing is, if you understand the brain really, really well, the fact is that we're all who we are because of our circumstances. So brainwashing, which we see in small pockets of the world, small kids are brainwashed into becoming terrorists. That could again become almost like a business where you brainwash a whole bunch of very very young people, and because you understand the mind and you understand mental health and you understand the body and mind connection, you could actually have human beings who are doing stuff without even understanding what they're doing.
Because the machine takes over the brain.
Whether the machine takes over or the machine level thinking takes over, I mean, you could make people, or there are people who already exist who think that killing other people is okay. They
Correct.
genuinely believe that they're doing it for a good cause
That's
and they're
like
going to go to heaven and
forever.
yeah. So you could do that at a population level, you could do that at a country level, you could do that at a
But I don't
you know
understand how like Hitler did it at a country population level as well. But from a technology perspective, how is that going to happen?
uh so the point is that because you understand the brain really well, you understand which part of your brain regulates your moral, ethical. The technology is in understanding the brain. It's
Hmm.
not in the brainwashing.
Okay, okay. Because you understand the different components of the mind and you know what lever to pull to trigger what.
What kind of, or maybe remove the moral, remove the ethical, or kind of, subdue the part of your conscience that tells you that this is wrong, I shouldn't be doing this. If that part of your brain is basically just not working anymore,
Hmm.
uh, then you're okay to do anything.
Hmm. Okay, okay, sure. And of course, with data, there's so much misuse that could happen,
There is
right?
so much misuse, but this is already happening. But I don't think you need to wait for the future. I mean, I think I get 2 scam calls every day. Someone, I get messages every day which tell me, your KYC has been stolen, and
Right now, it's happening
all that
at the
rubbish.
money level, right? It's all banking and
It's
large.
all at money level, but it's not so much of a segue to think this will happen at a data level, right? If they know I have high blood pressure, I'm going to get Parkinson's when I'm
Sure.
50.
Exactly.
You can play with me in so many more creative,
It
imaginative.
radicalize the insurance sector, right? Where they
Yeah.
say that, hey, your markers are already telling us this, and
So
premiums
we're
will.
not going to, we're not going to insure you, or we're going to insure you for some crazy premium. In India, anyway, very small part of the population is insured. So, it doesn't even,
Hmm.
it's not
Right.
even our biggest problem. But like when we're saying tailoring medicine to, make sense for your genes, uh, I could be tailoring poison
Hmm.
for a certain population. So I could be tailoring a disease, which works differently for people of Asian descent or Caucasians. Or it's not impossible. I
Hmm.
mean, COVID impacted different people differently. Different strains of COVID.
The other threat with what you spoke about, the personalization, could also be that if you're not part of that majority population, that I'm not manufacturing medicine for you because
For
you're not.
you, yeah, genocide. I mean, genocide by negligence, right? Where
Yeah,
you decide who to work for and everyone else can, yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I mean, again, hadn't thought about it, but yeah, possible. Why not?
Okay, all right. And let's, since you started off saying you were optimistic, and I took you into this black hole, tell me one or two things you're optimistic about, and then we'll start wrapping.
No, I am very, very optimistic about personalized medicine. Honestly, if you ask me, I think the downside is the fact that at least initially only the wealthy can afford it and most of the world cannot. But that's how everything starts, right? I mean, only the wealthy could get phones a while ago and now everyone has it. But I'm very, very optimistic about, because the side effects of allopathy are so large that if normal people knew about how much harm medicines do,
Mm,
half of us wouldn't even take any. So
mm,
if you can tailor medicines to populations or to families or to people, and reduce the negative impact. Even forget making it better and more impactful, but just reduce the negative impact. I think that itself is something I am so optimistic and kind of so looking. I really hope I said this at the beginning. I really hope I get to see the day when this is widely possible, widely available. I mean, imagine cancer patients getting chemotherapy without basically half killing themselves.
Okay. But I mean, that's going to require like a serious amount of data, then a segregation of that data, then an understanding of who fits into what bucket, right? Because they'll have to bucket the populations. Either it's 5 buckets, 10, 50, 5 million
500
buckets,
Who knows, right? Yeah.
And then
but when that happens, right? I mean, people are talking about curing cancer. I think that's where the cure of cancer will happen. You have to be able to break it down to the bare, the single brick of Lego, and then kind of take it from there.
And you're saying they actually modify the medication to suit each bucket?
Individual, a lot better.
Wow. Okay. Wow. There's a lot of work coming up. But with this kind of access to data, then the technology has to then keep up. The data will come faster than the innovation.
Than the technology, yes, for sure. And then the approvals and the, the FDA and the clearance. So all of that, but this, I'm very, very confident of our last 1 hour of conversation. The one thing I'm confident about is personalized medication is going to be the future of pharma for sure.
Okay. All right. I think you've opened up our eyes to a lot of possibilities, a lot of change that's coming. I'm just left with that question, and we don't have to answer it because I don't know if we have the answer. It's for me, it's still a chicken and egg, right? Like, who's going to be the first mover in this new evolving landscape? Because even if you're personalizing medication for an organization, it has to be profitable, right? They say, okay, is this profitable? Then we do it. But if the customer takes a stand saying we will only consume this medication if it's personalized, then you got a market force that dictates to the organization, or you get a government saying you can't sell generics anymore. You have to. So is it governance? Is it consumer? Is it organization? Where is this? Is it the innovation which just makes it really easy and cheap?
I think it has to be the innovation. I mean, there are philanthropists, right? Like there's got to be this one mad person who says, I've made $1 billion. I've made like $500 billion, and I'm going to use it for the greater good of humanity. And all of it is going to go into, I mean, I'm obviously kind of oversimplifying things, but all mad ideas begin in someone's garage, in someone's head, and this work happening. It's not gone to where it has to reach, obviously, but there's work happening. There's genome testing happening. There's personalization of medicines being maybe at population level or at gender level, but it's being discussed. It's being experimented with. So there are multiple moving blocks that are working, and at one point someone with a lot of money, whether it's a government or a person, is going to bring it all together. And you just need that one tipping point. You need that one critical mass.
Okay, let's hope that tipping point comes soon, Runam. Thank you so much. This has been incredibly informative, and look forward to seeing. I'm glad we'll get to see the future together, Runam. Let's see how this unfolds. And I think every 5 years we should watch this interview together.
Just to see how much was right.
How much was correct. Okay, but this is great. Thanks, Runam. Thank you so much for doing this, and look forward to connecting soon. Thank you.